Nice to be with you all. Thank you for breakfast. Because I thought that one of the demands from the 1968 walkout was soul food and a ratty, I was looking for the cheese grits and didn't quite see them. So, President Paxson, maybe you can.
That was before the health food trend.
In the setup for this session, in talking with my colleagues here, I thought to provide a brief context about what we're here to talk about. The Black artist movement in America and its implications for promoting inclusivity across all media. So, here's a stab at it. Historically, Black artistic expression has been a locus of community celebration, cultural assertion, a force for liberation and activism, a platform for dispelling myths and distortions about Black people, and replacing them with authentic stories and images about Black people as they see themselves and not defined by others. Projection through their cultural racial lens of the beauty, nobility, and worth of Africans in the New World, as my mentor George Bass, the founding artistic director of Rights and Reasons, would say. By the way, I'm going to get my swag on for a second. I'm a student founding member of Rights and Reason, and it's in its 48th year right now. And Black artists have been chroniclers of the realities of Black life and how Black people see the world. Now, we saw this during the explosion of Black artistic expression during the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s and 1930s. We saw it in the Black arts movement of the 1960s that culturally and artistically paralleled the Black power and civil rights movements. We've even seen it in hip-hop from the late 70s until today. Black artists and storytellers have been one of the public voices of collective Black wisdom in history, of racial memory, insisting that Black peoplehood be recognized and valued as legitimate, as worthy of attention and support, and as universal and relevant as any other peoples. There have been and are intellectual, social, political, cosmological, and communal dimensions to these artistic expressions that accompanied their agency for societal transformation and healing, the uplift of the human lot, the expansion of consciousness and conscience, and the enlargement of human understanding through the prism of their beautiful, gifted, audacious Black selves. Church say amen. Amen. Black presence is foundational to the forming of the American experiment. So within that context, we have two accomplished, creative Black women who have made significant and impactful marks in the artistic and cultural landscape since the 1968 walkout, 50 years ago. And both are Brown University alumni. And they're both here today to tell you something about their journeys. We'll start with you, Debra. How'd you get from here to where you are now?
Wow. Well, it's been a few years. And after hearing your introduction, now I know why I'm so tired all the time. It's pretty heady stuff. Yeah. So how did I, well, I'll start at the beginning. I started at Brown in 1972. It was the 70s, and I majored in Chinese communist ideology. Oh. And so it didn't exactly prepare me for the career I've had, and my only excuse for it is it was the 70s. And I was looking for another way, and Brown encourages you to look for another way. So I thought Chinese communist ideology was the way. And but then I went to Harvard Law School, and they didn't want to hear any of that stuff. They didn't even want to talk about public policy or civil rights or women's rights or rights of people of color. So, I was kind of trapped. I was like, okay, I can't drop out of law school because my father was in the military, and he got unhappy very quickly if you let him down. So I went to the Kennedy School to try to salvage my law career, and thought I would go to Washington and be assistant secretary of something. I felt like the civil rights days were over. I wasn't going to be Constance Baker Motley, who I originally wanted to be when I went to Harvard Law School. So I said, I'll go into government. Well, I went to DC and clerked for a year, and during that year, Ronald Reagan won. And so that ended my government career. So as you can see, it wasn't a straight line by any stretch. So I went to a big law firm to hide out till the Democrats came back. If you all remember, that took 12 years. There were a couple of Reagan, a couple of Bushes. It was a long time. And after being at a law firm for 5 years, I really felt like I didn't fit in, because I didn't. But I had a small client called Black Entertainment Television that not many people had heard of. I think at the time, BET had 10 million subscribers. It wasn't even broadcast in DC because we didn't have cable yet. So BET was growing, and I decided I wasn't going to make partner at the firm, so it was time to leave. And I was offered a position to come over and start the legal department at BET, and that was 1986. And as they say, the rest is history. When I got to BET, I was the first in-house counsel. I did a lot of the business deals, and over time, I kind of took over the business part of the operation. I became chief operating officer. BET went public in 1991. We became the first African-American company to go public on the New York Stock Exchange. Then we went private in 1998. Then we were acquired by Viacom in 2001. And during that time, I was doing more and more business things. And as COO, I was responsible for everything, the operations of the whole company. So I started learning about programming and advertising sales and all the things I didn't know about. And in 2005, I became chairman and CEO. So that's a shortened version. So I had a career at BET for 32 years. It's not what I thought I was going to do when I was at Brown University. And it just worked. And I think some of what you said, Benny, goes into how I came to grips with changing the world in a different way. And that focuses on the images of Black folks. And the thing that appealed to me about BET when I joined was, one, it was a Black-owned company. Two, it was doing programming for the African-American community, and it was the only network at the time doing that. So we felt a larger sense of responsibility, not only to entertain, but to educate and inform. And we came up with a branding strategy that our goal was to respect, reflect, and elevate our audience. And over the years, we've had more competition, thankfully, and there are different outlets. But my career at BET really allowed me to help shape images of Black folks, not only for ourselves, but for the world. And I think that part you kind of left out of your introduction. It's not only the images we create for ourselves, but it's also images that we want to show to the world. So when I took over BET, we were 60% music videos. And today we have no music videos. I'm very proud of that. And when we started in the music video business, it was Aretha, it was Earth, Wind and Fire. Over years it became hip hop, and we got caught in the controversy about hip hop videos. And so I kind of, led the company through that. It was a turbulent time, to say the least. But when I took over, I said my goal was to create original programming because that's what our audience wanted. So I started doing dramas like Being Mary Jane and The Quad and the New Edition story. We started doing comedies like The Game and Let's Stay Together. It was a major shift, and it was like, shifting a plane, no, what do they say, changing the wheels as the plane is flying. Because in the meantime, we still had to get ratings, and that's a big part of the television business. But I recently stepped down, and so looking back over my 32-year career, I feel really great about what we were able to accomplish and how we added to the change in Black programming and the way the media business feels about Black programming.
Yes.
So I'll stop there.
Congratulations on that legacy. Yes. Debra, how if you were to take a before and after snapshot of what the landscape looked like when you entered, and then where things are at the end of your tenure, are there ways to evaluate beyond ratings the impact of the work that you've done at BET over those 30-year periods, and how has the needle moved, and in what ways?
Yeah, I think just at BET or in the TV business?
Well,
either or both. Well, I think there are other ways to measure it. One way is to look at the abundance of Black programming that's coming out now. I think we at BET proved the case. When I put on a show called The Game, and we took it from the CW network and put it on BET, at the CW it was getting 1.5 million subscribers. The first night, and it was off the air for 2 years, so the first night we put it back on BET, and we took over production pretty much with the same crew. But that night we got 7.7 million subscribers. I remember Tyler Perry sent me flowers. The head of TV One called me, and it was like we have proven the case. If you put on quality programming, African Americans will show up. We want to see images of ourselves, but we want to see authentic images. I try to stay away from the words positive and negative, because depending on where you sit, those can mean different things. But if it's authentic, and The Game was authentic, and we embrace it and we show up. And other networks have found that out now. That's why Empire is on Fox. That's why Shonda Rhimes has a night on ABC. We know and now moving to Netflix. That's why Kenya Barris has got a $100 million deal from Netflix. So I think the abundance of Black programming, even though we still have constraints, and we can talk about that, and issues, and we're not gonna ever like everything that comes out. But I think that we can take some credit for that. I think also on BET, with our Respect, Reflect, and Elevate mission statement, it allowed us to really hold up a filter to everything we did. So we changed our award shows. I started shows like BET Honors, Black Girls Rock. For me to see young girls walking around talking about why they rock, because they've seen Black Girls Rock, and they've seen images and stories of successful Black women, and they know what they want to be when they grow up, and they have the self-confidence. So to me, that's a win, whether it rates or not. Yes. So a double win is when that happens and it rates. That's like winning the Super Bowl. And luckily, Black Girls Rock rates very well. BET Honors, not as much. But you have to face those challenges in the world. So just being able, I really, you talk about your purpose in life. I think one time watching BET Honors, and I think T.D. Jakes was getting the award, and he was talking about purpose in life. And I thought to myself, one of my purposes in life is to tell the stories of successful and accomplished African Americans, no matter what field, and especially in fields other than music and sports, because we see that all the time. But if I can tell the story if I can tell the story of Dr. Keith Black, who's a brain surgeon in LA, or Ken Chenault, who was the CEO of American Express, or Judith Jamison, who's with Alvin Ailey. When you tell those stories and young people see those stories and know they can be whatever they want to be,
yes.
You know, they just have to see it. You know, and they have to believe it. And if it's teaching young girls to say Black girls rock or wear a Black girls rock t-shirt, if that's the avenue, that's a win for me.
Yes.
So I think there are a lot of different ways. Oh, and the other thing I haven't talked about are the number of people who got into this business because of BET. You know, who started their careers at BET or worked there for years. I mean, that's always been one of the most rewarding parts of my job, is being able to hire young people of color and all kinds of people, but we're, you know, still 95% Black executives and employees, to be able to hire those people who wouldn't get opportunities at other networks. Yes. And get them started and let them soar, because, you know, you talk about diversity and inclusion, sometimes you got to give people a chance. They may not have exactly the qualifications you're looking for. So if I went out and said I wanted a Black CFO, I might not have be able to find a lot of Black folks who have been CFOs. But if I say, well, if I hire a treasurer, and they can learn to be a CFO on the job, because that's what happened with me. I wasn't a general counsel before I went to BET. You know, someone believed in me and I had that opportunity. So I can go on, but I think, you know, I want to hear Lynn talk.
Yes. So several needles moved during your tenure.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
I feel, and you know, it makes me so happy when young people and older people come up to me on the street and they say, thank you for what you've done for BET and how you've changed the programming. But the young people now come up to me and say, I was at an event and a young Black guy was the waiter, and now they come up to me and say, thank you for what you've done for the culture.
And we thank you, Debra.
It doesn't get any better than that.
Church, say amen. Lynn Nottage, as a practitioner and playwright, your journey was unique and distinct. Tell us something about that.
Sure, thank you. I have to thank you for what you've done. And I was listening to you talk about storytelling because I'm that those are my roots, and I came to Brown University not knowing that I wanted to tell stories. I entered this university as pre-med, not because I wanted to be a doctor, but because that was the journey that a lot of our parents pushed us toward. And I did 2 semesters of mathematics and sciences, and then I got to chemistry. And that was the hurdle and the obstacle. And when I was sitting in that chemistry class, and some of you probably have heard me tell this story before, but I was sitting in organic chemistry class, and it was a big hall. There was about 350 people in this particular room. And the professor drew a bell curve on the board, and it went from 32 to 100. And I remember sitting in the very back row with someone, and I said to her, it's like, I wonder who got 32. And then I had to walk down the steps to the very front and then open up my little blue booklet, and I saw the big red 32. I thought, And then I had to walk all the way back up the steps, stoically, knowing that I had 32, and I realized in that moment that I was a dramatist and that I was meant to be a performer. So that's where it began. And immediately I had to recalibrate and think, well, how do I make this happen? And I happened to step into the classroom of Professor George Bass, who was this magical individual who really brought the notion of storytelling to life for me. And I don't know whether there's anyone here who was in George Bass's class, but you know just how transformative that experience was. And one of the experiences that I had in George's class, it was the very last one, and we had this ritual in which we were celebrating our ancestors, and he happened to be the executor of Langston Hughes' estate.
Yes.
And you know, we were invoking the ancestors, and he said, close your eyes And he asked us to hold out our hands, and then he placed something in our hands, and he said, close your hands and open your eyes. And he said, you're holding a little piece of Langston, and this is part of the continuity, and he's like, I always want you to hold that. And I still have a little piece of Langston, and that's really
because
the
he had
foundation.
his ashes.
Huh? He had his ashes.
He had Langston Hughes' ashes
because
in
he was
his house
executive in
on
his
Poplar
house.
Street, yes.
Yeah, and he used to. Yeah. When I was graduating, I thought, what am I going to do? And I applied to the Yale School of Drama at a moment that was really fraught and difficult in America. I was entering theater at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic and the beginning of the crack epidemic, and we were in this absolute battlefield because it hit the arts industry very hard. I went through 3 very tough years watching friends of mine die, both fellow students and faculty members. And when I graduated, I thought, I can't make art because it didn't feel like it was essential at that moment. I thought, I have to do something. And so for 4 years, I became the national press officer at Amnesty International, and I handled major media for the biggest human rights organization in America. And then one day, I was sitting in my office, and someone brought in an image of a woman just as she was leaving a homeless, just as she was arriving at a battered woman's shelter. And she said, what can you do for this woman? And I realized that I was in an organization that couldn't do anything for this black woman. And so I closed my door and I wrote a play in response. And I thought, this is what I can do. I can tell her story. And so that led me back into storytelling. I temped for 10 years trying to be a storyteller. I took whatever job I could get in order to sort of nurture my storytelling. And I was entering in a landscape where we didn't have BET. You know, we didn't have Being Mary Jane. We didn't have Shonda Rhimes. I was entering a landscape where the only thing that I'd seen on television that slightly reflected my experience was Good Times and Sanford and Son. And I thought, how am I going to do this? And so just slogging through and insisting that my story being told, slowly I began to see doors opening up. And I can go on, but it was hard, and I'm not going to pretend that it wasn't hard, but I'm someone who always looks for the rainbow. You know, racism is real. It's that obstacle that we're always going to have to leap over, but the fact is that it's changing. The fact is that we're in a golden moment of Black storytelling. That when I look out at the landscape, I see young people who have been influenced by people who are sitting on this stage who feel emboldened to tell their stories in ways that I never felt as a young person. And one of the phrases that I hold on to is sustaining the complexity, is that it used to be that we felt we can only tell positive stories, but now we can sustain the complexity and tell stories that really reflect the multitude of experiences in the Black community, and they're different. I look around this room, and in this room, the experience is very different than the experience of people who are just down the hill. And there is room now for us to tell all of those stories.
Wonderful. Were you about to say something?
I agree with Lynn, and I think we are in a golden time. We're in a golden time of storytelling overall, because there are so many platforms, and people, networks and platforms have learned that Black people watch a lot of television and streaming. I mean, we do, and we show up, as I said before. So you're right, this is such a golden moment, and people are having more opportunities than ever before. And I would say, maybe we went through something like this in the 80s because of Cosby, the Cosby Show. There are a lot of spin-offs and shows that tried to imitate Cosby because that was so successful. Unfortunately, after that, the doors were closed for a while. So I think 2 things I would just add to what Lynn said. We have to worry about, will the doors be closed again? Because the networks are still owned by majority of white men, and theatrical, those studio decisions are made by white men, but luckily, there are alternatives like Netflix and digital and things like that. But aside from the fact that the door may close, the other thing we have to worry about is being able to tell the stories the way we want to. Because again, the decision makers are there, and if it's TV, they're worried about ratings. If it's movies, they're worried about who's going to show up the first weekend. And you still have decision makers who try to bend those stories and have more editorial input than we would like. So it's still not a free landscape. It's not like we own, even at BET, I didn't own the network. Viacom owns the network, and I had some freedom in greenlighting things, but if the ratings weren't there, I couldn't say, hey, I really like this and this is important for the Black community, so don't hold me accountable to the ratings, and don't worry that we have to give money back to advertisers, which you do if you don't hit the rating promises. So they're all, I guess what I'm trying to say is there are always constraints. And we have to talk about those. And I think one of the best things that's happened recently is Netflix, because they're just out there throwing money at everything. And they don't.
You get any of that, Lynn? I don't know.
Yeah, she's working on, she's got to have it.
She's got to have it.
Right.
I think one of the things
and they don't have ratings.
that you say that's so interesting is there is a lot of African-American programming out there, but if you pull back the curtain, in those writers' room, there still aren't a lot of African-American writers who are shaping what we see. Right. So, on one hand, it's fantastic that we're being represented, but it's who's shaping those representations that we still struggle with. Yeah. I was in the writer's room for She's Gotta Have It, and one of the things that I was really proud of, because I was part of pulling together that writer's room, is that we were majority Black women with 2 Black men there, and for the first time I thought, we can actually shape what you see. And it was exciting. I mean, the first day that we walked into the room, we high-fived. It's like, this doesn't exist anywhere else. But now you see Atlanta, which has an all-Black writer's room. You see Insecure, which has a multicultural writer's room. Right. I don't know, being Mary Jane, whether all-Black writer's room. But these are the things that we have to fight for, is not just representation, but who's shaping those representations.
Right. And then, I'll just add, I've been in this business a long time, and then you have to worry about the response from the audience, depending on whether they like the story or not. Like, for example, The Quad, which was a show we had on BET, written by all Black writers' room. All the people involved with it went to historically Black colleges. They were very proud of their colleges. So they thought they had made, a compelling story, a series based on experiences. But the president of Hampton called me and after the first episode, and he said, how could you work to destroy historically Black colleges? And I'm like, I'm sorry, what are you talking about? what part of it? He said, it's the president of the college is a woman, and she's sleeping with a student, and she got kicked out of a white university, and now she's at a Black university, and that would never happen. My board would never let that happen. I was like, it's a drama. We're trying to make it interesting so people will watch it. We're not saying this is what happens at Hampton University. He had me on the phone. He wrote a letter to the world saying, we were doing this horrible thing. And I called the writers. I'm like, what are y'all doing? They're like, look, we're just telling a story. It's our story. And I said to him, you'll love this. I said to him, well, and he was very nice. It was very pleasant, tense conversation. But he said to me, this would never happen. And I said, this is scripted. This is not a reality show. This is scripted. It's make-believe. I said, there's a show called Scandal, and it's about a Black woman who is sleeping with a white president, and that's the way TV is. And he said to me, 2 wrongs don't make a right.
But that's...
I mean, and he wanted a letter writing campaign for people to boycott our show because he didn't like so anyway, we got to deal, because the African American community is multifaceted, right? And we have different interests and different wants. And so, you know, the gospel community may like Celebration of Gospel, but they're never going to watch the Hip Hop Awards. And so you got to figure it out. And so, you know, someone may say, well, I don't like She's Gotta Have It because the woman is nude, and how could you show a nude woman? Or, you know, it's complicated.
Because that's life. Well, that's life, and life does what life does, and it's often stranger than fiction. And this perhaps raises your phrase about the sustaining the complexity, because life is complex, and having come out of a period where we may have been starved for seeing ourselves represented in the various mediums, we would tend to want to see heroic stories of us in noble, right? But life isn't always heroic. It's, you know, where there's mud, there's life, and it's a storyteller's responsibility to tell all of it, or at least to have the freedom to be able to tell all of it. And so we're getting into the area you mentioned about constraints and issues. What needs to be done now, or what can be helpful, not just for your continuing contributions in your lives, but for those who are coming behind us, even some who are in school at this institution right now, who are following in your footsteps?
Well, if I can address that, because I'm a theater artist, one of the things that I think is really important is mentorships, is nurturing the next generation. Because when I was coming up, the landscape was very barren, and I felt as though I was grappling in the dark. But now I can mentor someone like Terrell Alvin McCraney,
yes.
And he can go on to win an Academy Award. Yeah. And people don't see those invisible strings that we're holding the hands of many people to make that happen. But I think that the mentorships don't have to be on the part of writers helping writers or producers helping producers, but where I see the real absence is critics, is the people who are shaping how we view the work. And those of us who are in the nonfiction fields can begin nurturing the next generation of critics and social commentators. The other thing that I see there's a real absence in theater is people of color who are running major institutions. And so I still, when I'm trying to get my work done, I have to knock on the door, and when that door's open, it's still by and large a white man who invites me in, and I would love to knock on that door just once, and that door swings open and it's a black woman. And so I think that the major institutions have to begin nurturing the below-the-line people, the producers, the directors, the designers, the costume designers. And I know in the film landscape, there are very few black costume designers. There are very few black production designers, that there's these absences so that the portrait is incomplete. We have writers and directors now, but the portrait is still not complete because we're not shaping the entire picture.
I would add to that one thing that everyone in this room can do and audiences can do is you have to show up. You know, if you want a certain kind of storytelling or a certain type of television show or a certain type of play or a movie, you have to show up. Yeah. It's all about, you know, the revenue that's coming in, and you have to show up, you know, opening weekend for movies, I assume pretty early on for plays before they make a decision whether to keep it or close it down. With TV, and a lot of people really don't know this, you know, we all have learned from Netflix how to binge watch and how to wait till, you know, the series stack up. I'm gonna watch, you know, Being Mary Jane, all 10 episodes on a Saturday. Well, that doesn't help me at all. I just want you to know, if you don't watch it the night it comes on, within 3 days of the night it comes on, Nielsen ratings give you 3 days. Wow. So if Being Mary Jane comes on Tuesday night and you say, I'm gonna wait till Saturday to watch it, I don't get credit for that at all. So you have to watch a TV show for it to count for a network or a producer or whoever. You have to watch it within 3 days. And it's antiquated, and I hope they change it soon, because that's not the way people watch television anymore. And that's why you see network ratings going down, because no one shows up. There used to be a time, the last couple of years, the only thing people would show up live for are sports events and, compelling TV where you didn't want to read about it on Twitter. So you might show up for Scandal at 10 o'clock on Thursday night, because you know if you don't, you're going to read about what happened. So sports, compelling TV, and award shows. Now people don't even show up for award shows because they know they can wait the next day and hear what the best performance was and watch that on YouTube. So they don't have to sit through 3 hours of an award show. Sports is still, it holds true still with sports. And shows less, because people, again, they want to binge watch, they want to wait. The whole system is changing. But as consumers, it's important to show up. Because if I'm running BET, and BET is owned by Viacom, and they also own VH1, and people show up in droves to see Love and Hip Hop, in droves. And then I come in and say, oh, well, I have this really, high quality drama. And, my ratings are 1 and Love and Hip, but they're like, well, because again, it's white men. They're like, well, why aren't you doing that Love and Hip Hop stuff? Because your audience shows up for that. On Monday night, VH1 is the most watched because they got all the Black reality shows. And it's, not great Black reality. I'm still a corporate, kind of ex-corporate executive. But
I find that really interesting. How do you condition the audience and migrate that audience from VH1 and MTV to BET?
Yeah.
Because I know that I binge watch television shows because that's my schedule. It's like on Sunday I can lie down and I can watch television, but I didn't know that I had to watch those programs within 3 days for it to count.
Right.
And I bet the majority of the people sitting in this room had no idea, so how do we get that word out?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, you heard it, so you know what to do, right? All of you?
I tell everyone I know, watch it within 3 days. But it is.
It's just turn on my television.
Yeah, right. And
that
have
moment.
it, right. And to make matters worse, the Nielsen boxers are controlled by about 1,500 Black folks in the country, and if a couple of them go on vacation, that can skew your rate. I mean, it's the worst. It's the worst. But I hear people in theater and movies complain too. People are getting the wrong ticket stubs, or people don't show up the first weekend. So I think we do have to talk about it more, and we do have to understand how the different media, how differently they work.
So this session is being recorded, yes. I presume it may be available later on by a wider audience, perhaps, maybe streamed. So knowing that, here's an opportunity for some of you to, since we are in an institution of higher learning and there are people studying in these fields that they're about to enter, and not just for students here at Brown, but perhaps even beyond, if they can get access to this. What would you like to say to them? That could be perhaps helpful, or a heads up about what they're about to step into, or to charge them with something to continue the torch beyond your contributions or beyond, or?
Well, I think I would say I would encourage young people to get into the media business and the storytelling business, because it is so important. It's not the fluff that you would normally think of. Images are important. They are important. I remember when, I'm going to really show my age here, but when Julia came on, and, right?
Yeah.
And it was a single Black woman who's a nurse, whose husband, I think, had died, and she has a young son. That meant so much to me, that really, because TV was just becoming popular, and you didn't see that many of us on. You know, I remember when, you know, the Supremes came on Ed Sullivan, and we're calling each other, turn on CBS, you know, Diana Ross is on.
Or the Supremes and the Temptations.
Oh my
remember
God.
that session when
Oh
they
my
sang together?
God.
Oh my God, you remember that?
And
Must-see TV.
Right.
Yes.
But the Supremes said to me, as a young black woman in the segregated South with a little turntable, you know, with 45s, the Supremes said to me, you can be glamorous, you can be beautiful, you can be talented, you can travel the world, you can sing with the Temptations.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, that was inspirational to me. And so images do matter, and storytelling does matter. And what Lynn said is very true. We need the complexity and the diversity of stories. You know, if the only story we have, or if the only thing that the world sees about us is hip hop, or certain kinds of hip hop, or the story of a drug addict, then people are going to think, you know, all black people look like the people in hip hop videos. But if we have dramas and sitcoms and award shows and theater and different types of media, and people know that our community is diverse, and we have black CEOs and black brain surgeons, and but yeah, some people in our family may have a drug problem, and what do you do to help that person? I mean, one of the things I like most about the series being Mary Jane is Mary Jane was the successful one in her family. And the rest of her siblings were not as successful. And part of the storyline is, what is your responsibility as the successful person in a black family? Do you carry the rest of your family? And I'm sure everyone in this room deals with that. What is your responsibility? And the other thing I liked about Mary Jane was that she was a professional woman, but she had a kind of active social life, we will say. So she had complexity, and she had issues. She was once, you know, dating a married man. I mean, it was complicated, but I think the storyline I loved the most was her and her family and how she dealt with that. And she had, you know, actually one brother who had a drug issue, and then one brother who was selling drugs to support his architectural career. So they were different storylines. But I mean, that's the kind of things we need to see. We don't need to see, I always say, I never wanted BET to be the black PBS. I mean, you know, we need those documentaries, and we need the, you know, news and information and all of that. But, you know, I want people to be entertained also. So you have to have a mix. And the more of a mix we have, I think the better off. So back to my point, I would encourage young people to think about being storytellers. Like Lynn said, when I came to Brown, I had two options. I was either going to be a lawyer or a doctor. That's all my parents would accept. It was like, pick one. But you're going to Ivy League school, and you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Don't come back here, you know, trying to... When I told my dad I wanted to be a fashion designer and take classes at RISD, he was like, well, you know, you're crazy. I even remember, I think fondly of Rights and Reasons and the Afro-Am and Churchill. And my promise to myself as a freshman is I would take one Afro-Am class every quarter, semester, whatever we had. I wasn't going to major in it, but I would take one. I remember my father, who's a major in the military, called me my sophomore year, and he said, okay, you've taken enough Afro-Am classes. If you haven't figured out who you are by now, I'm sorry, I'm not paying for you to go to Brown and take Afro-Am class. So we all had that balance of, you know, what we want to do and what's important to us and what our parents expected of us. But I think, you know, if I had to do it all over again, I would do something more creative much earlier. I was lucky that my law career took me into a creative space, but I would encourage young people to do that.
And I guess what I would tell you young people who are here at Brown today is that you're part of a vital community, and that there are many of us here who are prepared to nurture and support you and to pick up the phone and ask for help. It's one of the things that I didn't know as a young person that I could do, and I suffered in isolation, but I don't think that people have to suffer in isolation anymore.
Yes. You mentioned mentorship earlier, and there's an old saying that says, when the student is ready, the teacher will come. George Bass was that person for me as well, who shaped my life indelibly and the lives of many other folks. Just wanted to invoke his name again,
Yes.
now that I'm back on these grounds.
And I would just say in terms of mentorship, never ask, if there are students in here, never ask anyone to be your mentor. Just don't ask, because that just implies a lot of things. If someone you admire and want to get to know, invite them out for coffee, get to know them. And if someone sitting in our chairs likes you, then they'll become a mentor to you. You don't have to ask them to.
Yeah.
Invite them to coffee once a year or twice a year or whatever. There are a lot of different ways to do it. But as soon as someone comes up to me and says, will you be my mentor? I'm like, oh, that sounds like a lot. But I'm
offer
always,
to help them in what they're doing, and then
Right.
you can get folded into
whatever they're doing.
And then they end
you
up
think about
taking-
them.
yes.
Right. There are a lot of different ways to do it.
So we've talked a lot about black storytellers and black viewers, whether on the various medium platforms or in the live theater, but there are other people, whites, Asians, Latinx, etc., who also view what storytellers are putting out there. Has that needle moved in terms of shaping perceptions of black people
Well,
by other
yeah.
folks?
Well, I would just say, Asians and Latinx is an important symbol of the work we still have to do. I mean, Crazy Rich Asians was an amazing movie. But why was Hollywood surprised in this day and age that it did well? I mean, how many times do we have to prove the case? It was like, oh my God, it made $30 million. Well, yeah, there are a lot of Asians around. I went to see it. I went to see it on a Sunday night at 8 o'clock in Century City in LA, and the audience was half Asian and the rest black and other races white. And it was sold out on a Sunday night at 8 o'clock. And I'm sitting there thinking, why are they surprised? How many Black Panthers do you have to have? How many, Crazy Rich why has it been 25 years since Joy Luck Club to now you have another movie about Asians? So we complain about where we are, or I try to be like Lynn. I try to be the rainbow glass half full person. So I try not to complain a lot. But, you think about when was the last time there was a huge Latin movie? And it's not because they don't go to the movies. They go to the movies and they want to see themselves. We all want to see ourselves. So we have to be supportive of their product. I mean, I felt really great being in Crazy Rich Asians the first week. And luckily I had just finished the book the week before, and the book was fun. So I knew the movie was going to be fun. And there may be some, I don't know, maybe some Asians who say it was fluff and, about rich, whatever. It was a movie, and people went to see it. And, hopefully it's the start of more to come. But you're right, they have more issues, I think, than we have.
One of the things as a storyteller, I think a lot about inclusion. And when I'm writing, how can I be inclusive? Because I think so often segregation continues on the stage and on the screen. So when you go and see a black film, it's a black film. You go and see a white film. And I thought, how can I tell a story that's inclusive and invite sort of my Latinx friends into my stories and my Asian friends into my stories?
And it's not just inclusive, it's the way the world is. So Being Mary Jane, her producer was Latin. The head of the network was white. We had several white actors in that show and the quad. I mean, you can't, I always said I never want to do to white people or other races what Friends did to us. Pretend like there are no black people in New York City.
I hear you, and it's true.
It's not the real world.
The world
How can
has
you do that?
Yeah, we have to reflect our reality, and we live in a multicultural world. So we can't ignore it.
In our remaining few moments, I'd like to share a story about the impact you've had in the whole realm of inclusivity. I love Lynn Nottage's work. I've read almost everything she's ever written. I've directed some of her work. And she is not just an important, insignificant black playwright. She's an important American playwright, and a major one. But I was the producing director of Theater Virginia once upon a time in Richmond, Virginia, the former capital of the Confederacy, looking like me, wearing this earring, preaching the gospel of inclusion. All right? They said they wanted change. That's when they hired me. This is in 2001. So in my first season, I produced one of Lynn's plays, Crumbs from the Table of Joy. Actually, one of my favorites. I love all your work, but that one's just really near and dear to me. It's a story of a black single father from the South whose wife died, and he's raising two young preteen and teenage girls, struggling with it, and moves to Brooklyn, where he thinks Father Divine, he can get closer to Father Divine to help him. Am I getting it correctly? Right? Yes. And along the way, he meets a white woman, and they fall in love. And there are problems with that, and then the sister of his deceased wife comes up wanting to be the new mama, and then life happens, right? So I did this play in Richmond, Virginia, okay? Which is in many ways, in the theater that I was running, the bathrooms that just a decade earlier were segregated, blacks and whites only, were still there, and the people who were attending that theater then were still in my audiences. So I do a folk thought session afterwards, after the performance, and there's a young white teenage girl who said, I like this play because that man, Godfrey, is just like my father. And that's when I knew, I know why I'm doing this. The powerful, transformative power of storytelling that can make connections to the other. And when you can see yourself in the other, that's when you know you're doing something really important. That's the true story. This is what happened with your play there in Richmond.
That's lovely.
Yeah. So, unless there's something burning you'd like to say, I don't know how much time we have left, and they said we can't have a Q&A, but if somebody yells out something. Have we said it? Do we think?
Thank you.
Are we good people? Are we well met? Thank you, Debra Lee. Thank you, Lynn Nottage. Thank you, Brown University, and for this whole reunion this weekend.